The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of eastern Afghanistan as Team Bravo prepared for what their intelligence briefing called a routine reconnaissance mission. Staff Sergeant Marcus, Chen adjusted his radio headset one final time before giving his team the signal to move out. The 8-man SEAL unit had been deployed to this remote outpost for 3 weeks, conducting surveillance operations along the Pakistani border, where Taliban fighters frequently crossed to launch attacks on coalition forces. Chen was a veteran of 4 deployments, but something felt different about this mission. The night before, intercepted communications suggested a high-value target was moving through the Kunar Valley with a large group of fighters. Command wanted eyes on the situation, and Team Bravo was the closest unit capable of getting into position undetected. Petty Officer Jake Morrison shouldered his sniper rifle and checked his ammunition count for the 3rd time. At 26, he was the youngest member of the team, but arguably the best marksman in the platoon. His spotter, Petty Officer Rodriguez, had worked with him for 2 years, and they communicated with barely a glance. The rest of the team consisted of demolitions expert Thompson, communications specialist Williams, medic Patterson, and machine gunners Davis and Kelly. The insertion point was a rocky ledge approximately 2 kilometers from their target location. From there, they would move on foot through treacherous mountain terrain to establish an observation post overlooking the valley. The mission timeline called for 48 hours of surveillance before extraction, assuming weather conditions remained favorable. As they loaded into the helicopter, Chen reviewed the terrain maps one more time. The valley they were heading to was known locally as Death's Gateway, because of its narrow passages and steep cliffs that created perfect ambush points. Multiple coalition units had been attacked there over the past year, but none had successfully identified the source of the attacks. The helicopter ride took 30 minutes. Flying low through mountain passes to avoid detection, the pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Blake, had flown extraction missions in this area before and knew every peak and valley. She set the helicopter down gently on the designated landing zone, keeping the rotors spinning while the team quickly disembarked with their equipment. Within minutes, the helicopter disappeared into the morning sky, leaving the 8 SEALs alone in hostile territory. Chen used hand signals to organize his team into a tactical formation before they began their movement toward the observation point. The terrain was even more challenging than the maps had indicated, with loose rocks and hidden crevices that could easily cause injury or expose their position. Morrison took point with his rifle, scanning for potential threats while the rest of the team maintained proper spacing. They moved slowly and deliberately, taking advantage of natural cover and avoiding skylining themselves against the ridges. The weight of their equipment made the climb difficult, but these men had trained for years to operate in exactly these conditions. After 2 hours of careful movement, they reached their designated observation post on a cliff overlooking the target valley. Chen was immediately concerned by what he saw through his binoculars. Instead of the small group of fighters they expected, there appeared to be a significant number of armed men moving through the valley below. He counted at least 40 fighters, all carrying modern weapons and moving with military precision. Rodriguez set up his spotting scope while Morrison prepared his sniper position. The other team members established a defensive perimeter and checked their communication equipment. Williams tried to contact their base to report the unexpected enemy strength, but found that atmospheric conditions were interfering with radio transmission. The valley below was a natural choke point, with steep walls on both sides and only one way in or out. The Taliban fighters seemed to be setting up some kind of temporary camp near a cluster of abandoned buildings at the valley's center. Chen realized this was not a routine movement but possibly a staging area for a major operation. Thompson, the demolitions expert, pointed out several positions where the enemy had placed what appeared to be heavy weapons. Through his scope, Morrison could see fighters carrying rocket-propelled grenades in at least 2 machine gun positions. This was far beyond the capabilities of a typical Taliban cell. As the day progressed, more fighters continued to arrive in the valley. By afternoon, Chen estimated there were at least 60 armed men below their position. The enemy appeared to be well organized and disciplined, suggesting this was not a random gathering but part of a coordinated plan. Patterson, the team medic, noticed movement on the opposite cliff face through his binoculars. At first he thought it might be mountain goats, but the movement was too deliberate and followed patterns consistent with human activity. He alerted Chen, who studied the area carefully through his own optics. What Patterson had spotted was deeply concerning. There appeared to be enemy positions on the cliffs surrounding the valley, including the ridge directly across from their own position. The Taliban fighters were not just using the valley as a staging area. They were turning it into a fortified position with multiple overlapping fields of fire. Chen realized their mission had changed from surveillance to survival. They were no longer observing an enemy movement, but had inadvertently positioned themselves in the middle of what appeared to be a carefully planned ambush site. The enemy positions on the surrounding cliffs would make extraction extremely difficult, if not impossible. As evening approached, Williams continued his attempts to re-establish radio contact with their base. The interference seemed to be getting worse, and he suspected the enemy might be using jamming equipment. Without communication, they could not call for extraction or warn other coalition forces about the massive enemy presence in the valley. Morrison adjusted his rifle scope and settled into his hide position as darkness began to fall. He had a clear view of the valley below and several of the enemy positions, but he also knew that revealing their location by taking a shot would likely result in their immediate destruction. The team was outnumbered at least 8-1, with enemy fighters holding the high ground on multiple sides. Chen made the difficult decision to maintain their position through the night and attempt to gather more intelligence about enemy intentions. He hoped atmospheric conditions would improve overnight, allowing them to re-establish communications and call for support. What he did not know was that the Taliban fighters had already detected signs of their presence and were planning their own surprise for the American reconnaissance team. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Afghan mountains, but the beauty of the sunrise was lost on Team Bravo as they discovered their worst fears confirmed. During the night, enemy fighters had moved into positions that effectively surrounded their observation post. Chen counted at least 12 armed men on the ridge to their east and suspected there were more on the western approach they could not see from their current position. Williams had worked through the night trying to re-establish radio contact, but the jamming continued to block their transmissions. He managed to receive fragments of radio chatter from other coalition units, but could not send any messages about their situation. The team was effectively cut off from outside support with no way to call for extraction or reinforcement. Morrison had maintained watch through his rifle scope, documenting enemy positions and movement patterns. What he observed was deeply troubling. The Taliban fighters were not behaving like typical insurgent groups. They moved with discipline and coordination that suggested professional military training. Their weapons were newer than usual, and they had equipment that should not have been available to local fighters. Rodriguez whispered urgently to Morrison as he spotted something through his spotting scope. A group of fighters was setting up what appeared to be a large-caliber sniper rifle on the opposite cliff face, approximately 800 meters from their position. The weapon had a sophisticated scope and appeared to be a Russian-made rifle that could easily penetrate their cover. Chen gathered his team for a whispered conference, behind the largest boulder in their position. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and they needed to make critical decisions about their next moves. Staying in their current position was becoming increasingly dangerous as enemy forces closed in around them. However, attempting to move would almost certainly expose them to enemy fire from multiple directions. Thompson suggested they could create a diversion using some of their explosive charges, but Chen worried that would only confirm their exact location to the enemy. Davis proposed a fighting withdrawal to a secondary position they had identified during their approach, but the route would require crossing open ground under direct observation from enemy snipers. The team's medical supplies were limited, and Patterson expressed concern about their ability to treat serious injuries if a firefight developed. Their ammunition was sufficient for a short engagement, but a prolonged battle against superior numbers would quickly exhaust their resources. Each man carried approximately 300 rounds plus grenades and other specialized equipment. As the morning progressed, enemy activity in the valley below intensified significantly. More fighters continued to arrive, and Chen now estimated there were over 80 armed men in the immediate area. Several vehicles had appeared during the night, including what looked like a technical truck mounted with a heavy machine gun. Kelly, positioned on the team's southern flank, spotted movement that made the situation even more desperate. A group of enemy fighters was climbing the cliff face directly below their position, apparently attempting to reach their level from an unexpected direction. The fighters moved carefully but with obvious experience in mountain warfare. Morrison tracked the climbing fighters through his scope, counting at least 6 men making their way up the steep rock face. They were still several minutes away from reaching the top, but once they gained the same elevation as the SEAL team, the Americans would be caught in a crossfire between multiple enemy positions. Chen made the decision to engage the climbing fighters before they could reach firing positions. He signaled Morrison, who took careful aim at the lead climber. The shot would reveal their location to every enemy fighter in the area, but allowing the climbers to reach the top would be even more dangerous. Morrison's first shot echoed across the valley like thunder, and the lead climber fell backward off the cliff face. The remaining climbers immediately took cover among the rocks, but their advance was stopped. Within seconds, enemy fighters throughout the area began firing toward the general location of the shot. Though most did not have a clear target, the SEAL team found themselves under intense fire from multiple directions. Bullets struck the rocks around their position, sending chips of stone flying through the air. The enemy sniper on the opposite cliff began systematically searching for their exact location, and his shots came dangerously close to their concealed position. Davis returned fire with his machine gun, targeting enemy positions on the eastern ridge. His accurate fire forced several enemy fighters to take cover, but also drew more attention to the team's location. Williams continued his desperate attempts to break through the radio jamming, knowing that their survival now depended on outside assistance. Rodriguez called out range and wind corrections to Morrison as the sniper engaged targets across the valley. Each shot had to count, as revealing their position with gunfire meant every enemy fighter in the area now knew their approximate location. The professional training of the enemy forces became evident as they began coordinated movements to flank the American position. Patterson treated a miner, wound on Thompson's arm where a rock fragment had caused a cut, but so far the team had avoided serious casualties. However, the enemy was adjusting their fire and getting closer to the team's actual position with each passing minute. The situation was becoming unsustainable. Chen realized they had perhaps 30 minutes before enemy forces would be close enough to overwhelm their position through coordinated assault. The climbing team had been stopped, but other enemy fighters were moving to positions where they could direct accurate fire at the SEAL team. A withdrawal was becoming their only option for survival. The team began preparing for a tactical withdrawal to their predetermined secondary position, but the movement would be extremely dangerous. They would have to cross approximately 200 meters of partially exposed terrain while under fire from multiple enemy positions. The rocky ground provided some cover, but there were several open areas where they would be completely exposed. Kelly spotted additional enemy movement that made their situation even more critical. A group of fighters was attempting to reach a position on their northern flank that would allow them to fire directly into the team's current location. If those fighters reached their objective, the SEAL position would become completely untenable. Morrison engaged the flanking fighters, but his shots drew concentrated return fire from the enemy sniper across the valley. The enemy marksman was skilled, and his shots were getting progressively closer to Morrison's position. It was becoming a deadly duel between two expert snipers, with Morrison at a significant disadvantage due to the enemy's superior position. As noon approached, Chen knew they could not remain in their current position much longer. The enemy was closing in from 3 directions, their ammunition was being depleted by the constant firefight, and they still had no radio contact with their base. The team was facing annihilation unless something changed dramatically in their favor. The situation deteriorated rapidly as enemy forces tightened their grip around Team Bravo's position. Chen watched through his binoculars as coordinated groups of Taliban fighters moved with military precision to cut off all possible escape routes. The enemy commander clearly understood small unit tactics and was methodically closing every avenue the Americans might use to withdraw from their increasingly desperate position. Morrison's ammunition was running low after the extended sniper duel with the enemy marksman across the valley. Each shot had to be perfect, as wasting rounds could mean death for his entire team. Rodriguez continued feeding him target information and range corrections, but both men knew they were fighting a losing battle against superior numbers and positioning. Williams finally managed to break through the radio jamming for brief moments. sending fragmented distress calls that he hoped would reach their base. The messages were incomplete and heavily distorted, but he managed to transmit their grid coordinates and the word emergency several times before the jamming resumed. Whether anyone had received and understood the transmissions remained unknown. The enemy sniper across the valley had identified Morrison's general location and was systematically destroying the rocks that provided cover for the American marksmen. Each high-powered shot sent deadly fragments flying through the air and gradually reduced the protection available to the SEAL team. Morrison was forced to change positions repeatedly, but options for concealment were rapidly disappearing. Thompson prepared his remaining explosive charges, knowing they might need to create a diversion or destroy equipment to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. The demolitions expert had enough materials to potentially collapse part of the cliff face, but such an action might also trap the team or create an avalanche that could kill them along with their enemies. Kelly reported that enemy fighters on the northern flank had reached positions where they could begin directing accurate fire into the team's location. The machine gunner had been conserving ammunition, but now found himself forced to engage multiple targets simultaneously to prevent the team from being overrun. His weapon provided the heaviest firepower available to the Americans, but ammunition consumption was becoming critical. Davis coordinated his fire with Kelly to maintain overlapping fields of coverage, but both machine gunners were being forced to expose themselves to enemy fire in order to engage the advancing Taliban fighters. The enemy was using classic infantry tactics to bound forward from cover to cover, making themselves difficult targets while steadily advancing on the American position. Patterson moved between team members, checking for injuries and redistributing ammunition as needed. The medic carried extra rounds for the team's weapons, but their total ammunition supply was being depleted faster than anyone had anticipated. At their current rate of fire, they would exhaust their supply within 2 hours, assuming they survived that long. The enemy commander demonstrated his tactical skill by coordinating simultaneous advances from multiple directions, forcing the SEAL team to divide their attention and firepower among several threats. Every time the Americans focused on one group of attackers, other enemy elements would advance from different directions. The classic tactic was working perfectly against the outnumbered defenders. Rodriguez spotted new enemy activity that confirmed their worst fears about the sophistication of the attack. Additional fighters were moving into positions on the high ground above their location, preparing to fire down into their position from angles that their current cover could not protect against. The enemy was preparing a coordinated assault that would come from above, below, and from multiple sides simultaneously. Morrison engaged the fighters attempting to reach the high ground, but his shots drew intensive return fire from positions he could not see. The enemy had learned to coordinate their movements with covering fire, making it extremely difficult for the American sniper to effectively engage individual targets. Every shot Morrison took was answered by dozens of enemy rounds directed at his position. Chen realized they had perhaps 15 minutes before the enemy would be in position to launch their final assault. The SEAL team leader had to make an impossible decision: attempt a desperate withdrawal across open ground under heavy fire, or remain in their current position and hope for a miracle. Neither option offered realistic chances of survival against the overwhelming enemy forces. The sound of gunfire echoed continuously across the valley as both sides maintained steady rates of fire. The enemy fighters were well supplied with ammunition and showed no signs of conserving their resources. In contrast, the SEAL team was calculating every shot and trying to make each round count against multiple targets. Williams managed another brief radio transmission, this time clearly stating Team Bravo under heavy attack. Immediate assistance required. The transmission lasted only seconds before the jamming resumed, but the communications specialist hoped the message had been clearer than his previous attempts. However, even if the message had been received, help was hours away at minimum. Thompson reported that enemy fighters were attempting to place explosive charges at the base of the cliff directly below their position. If successful, the charges could collapse the rock face and bury the entire SEAL team under tons of stone. The demolitions expert requested permission to use his own charges to prevent the enemy from completing their work. But doing so would require exposing himself to concentrated enemy fire. Kelly's machine gun position came under direct attack from enemy fighters, who had advanced to within 100 meters of the team's perimeter. The machine gunner was forced to engage targets at point-blank range, while enemy bullets struck the rocks inches from his position. His return fire was accurate and deadly, but there seemed to be an endless supply of enemy replacements. The enemy sniper across the valley had finally ranged Morrison's position accurately, and his shots were now consistently striking within inches of the American marksman's location. Morrison was forced to abandon his primary position and attempt to find new cover, but the available options were extremely limited and offered poor fields of fire against enemy positions. Rodriguez called out warnings about enemy movement from multiple directions simultaneously, as Taliban fighters coordinated their advances to reach assault positions around the American perimeter. The spotter could see that the enemy was preparing for their final attack, with fighters moving into position to assault from at least 4 different directions at once. Davis reported his ammunition was nearly exhausted after maintaining sustained fire against multiple enemy positions. The machine gunner had been forced to engage so many targets that his weapon barrel was overheating, and he was concerned about mechanical failure if the intense rate of fire continued much longer. Chen gathered his team for what might be their final tactical discussion, knowing that within minutes they would either be fighting for their lives in close combat or attempting a desperate withdrawal under impossible conditions. The team leader looked at each of his men, knowing that their years of training and brotherhood might not be enough to overcome the overwhelming odds they now faced. The final assault began with a coordinated barrage of enemy fire from all directions simultaneously. Taliban fighters had reached positions that allowed them to direct devastating fire into the SEAL team's location from multiple angles, creating a killing zone that seemed impossible to survive. Chen watched as bullets struck the rocks around their position like a deadly hailstorm, sending fragments of stone flying through the air in all directions. Morrison was forced to abandon his sniper position entirely, as enemy fire concentrated on his location became too intense to survive. The American marksman crawled through the rocks seeking any available cover while bullets struck the ground inches from his body. His rifle scope had been shattered by enemy fire, reducing his ability to engage targets at long range and eliminating one of the team's primary advantages. Williams made one final desperate attempt to transmit their situation over the radio, broadcasting continuously on emergency frequencies, while enemy bullets struck the rocks around his position. The communications specialist managed to send coordinates and the words, "immediate extraction required," before an enemy round struck his radio, destroying their last link to outside assistance. The enemy fighters on the high ground above their position began dropping grenades into their perimeter, forcing the SEAL team to take cover in the deepest crevices between the rocks. The explosions were deafening in the confined space, and rock fragments from the blast created additional hazards for the already desperate Americans. Patterson treated multiple minor injuries from the grenade fragments while under continuous fire. Thompson made the decision to use his remaining explosive charges to create a defensive barrier, hoping to buy his team precious minutes of survival time. The demolitions expert crawled to positions where he could place charges that would collapse specific rock formations, creating obstacles to enemy advances. However, placing the charges required exposing himself to concentrated enemy fire from multiple directions. Kelly's machine gun finally malfunctioned from overheating after sustained fire, leaving the team without their heaviest weapon at the most critical moment. The machine gunner attempted field repairs while under fire, but the weapon's barrel had been damaged by the extreme heat generated during the prolonged engagement. Davis moved to assist Kelly while maintaining fire with his own weapon, but the loss of firepower was devastating. The enemy commander demonstrated tactical brilliance by timing his final assault to coincide with the Americans' lowest point of defensive capability. Taliban fighters advanced simultaneously from 4 directions, using covering fire and movement techniques that showed professional military training. The coordinated attack was designed to overwhelm the SEAL team's remaining defensive positions through sheer numbers and firepower. Rodriguez attempted to guide Morrison to targets using his spotting scope, but the enemy advances were happening so rapidly that targets changed position before the sniper could engage them effectively. The spotter could see enemy fighters reaching positions where they would be able to engage the American team at point-blank range within minutes. The sound of gunfire was now continuous and deafening as both sides engaged in the most intense firefight any of the SEAL team members had ever experienced. Enemy bullets struck their position at a rate of several rounds per second, making any movement extremely dangerous and limiting their ability to return effective fire against the advancing Taliban fighters. Chen realized that his team had perhaps 2 minutes before enemy forces would reach positions where close combat would become inevitable. The team leader made the decision to attempt a fighting withdrawal to their secondary position, knowing that the movement would be extremely dangerous but recognizing that remaining in place meant certain death or capture. Patterson gathered the team's medical supplies and prepared for the likelihood of treating serious injuries during the withdrawal movement. The medic had already used much of his supplies treating minor wounds from rock fragments and grenade explosions, but he knew the most dangerous part of their ordeal was just beginning. The withdrawal began with covering fire from Davis and Thompson, while the rest of the team attempted to move to positions offering better protection and fields of fire. However, the enemy had anticipated this movement and directed concentrated fire at the routes the Americans would need to use to reach alternative positions. Morrison attempted to provide sniper support for the withdrawal using iron sights on his damaged rifle, but the lack of magnification severely limited his effectiveness at the ranges involved. The marksman was reduced to engaging targets at medium range while trying to identify enemy positions through the chaos of the firefight. Williams attempted to destroy sensitive equipment and documents to prevent them from falling into enemy hands, but the intensity of incoming fire made it difficult to accomplish this task thoroughly. The communications specialist used thermite grenades to destroy radio equipment and encryption devices while bullets struck the rocks around his position. Kelly managed to get his machine gun functioning again, but the weapon was operating at reduced capability and could malfunction again at any moment. The machine gunner laid down covering fire to support his teammates' movement, knowing that his weapon might be their only hope of surviving the next few minutes. The enemy fighters pressed their attack with determination that suggested they understood they were close to completely overwhelming the American position. Taliban commanders could be heard shouting orders in multiple languages as they coordinated the final phases of their assault on the trapped SEAL team. Davis was hit by enemy fire while attempting to reach a new firing position, suffering a serious wound to his shoulder that reduced his ability to handle his weapon effectively. Patterson immediately moved to treat the wounded machine gunner while under intense fire, demonstrating the medical training and courage that made him an essential team member. Thompson's explosive charges detonated successfully, creating rockfalls that temporarily slowed enemy advances from 2 directions. But the demolitions expert was wounded by fragments from his own explosions. The charges bought the team crucial minutes of survival time, but also reduced their available cover and created new hazards within their defensive perimeter. Rodriguez reported that enemy fighters had reached positions where they could see directly into the team's location, eliminating the concealment that had been their primary protection. The spotter counted at least 20 enemy fighters in positions where they could direct accurate fire at the American team members individually. Chen looked at his wounded and exhausted team members, knowing that they had fought with incredible courage against impossible odds, but recognizing that their situation had become hopeless. The team leader prepared his men for what appeared to be their final stand, hoping that their sacrifice would at least provide intelligence about enemy capabilities to future coalition operations. Just as the Taliban fighters prepared for their final assault on the surrounded SEAL team, a single rifle shot echoed from the eastern cliffs with a sharp crack that cut through the chaos of the firefight. The enemy sniper who had been systematically destroying Morrison's cover suddenly slumped forward over his weapon, his body motionless on the rocky ledge 800 meters away. Chen raised his head cautiously from behind the boulder that had been protecting him, trying to understand what had just happened. The concentrated enemy fire that had been pouring into their position from multiple directions suddenly became confused and disorganized. As Taliban fighters began looking around uncertainly for the source of the unexpected shot, another precise shot rang out from the cliffs, and one of the enemy fighters directing the assault from the northern approach fell backward off the rocky ledge where he had been positioned. The remaining Taliban fighters in that area immediately took cover, their coordinated advance grinding to a halt as they tried to identify this new threat to their overwhelming advantage. Morrison wiped blood from his eyes where rock fragments had cut his forehead and squinted toward the eastern cliffs, trying to spot the location of their unexpected ally. Through his damaged rifle scope, he could make out a flash of movement among the rocks approximately 1,000 meters away, but the distance and terrain made positive identification impossible. Rodriguez grabbed his spotting scope and began systematically scanning the cliff faces for any sign of the mysterious sniper who had appeared at their moment of greatest desperation. The spotter's trained eye detected subtle signs of a concealed position among the rocks, but whoever was providing support was extremely well hidden and demonstrated professional-level fieldcraft. A third shot from the concealed position eliminated an enemy machine gunner who had been directing devastating fire at the SEAL team's location. The Taliban fighter was struck in the head and killed instantly, causing his weapon to fall silent and reducing the enemy's firepower advantage significantly. The precision and timing of the shots suggested their unknown ally was an expert marksman. Williams attempted to raise the mysterious sniper on various radio frequencies, but received no response to his calls. Whoever was providing support was either not equipped with compatible communication equipment or was maintaining radio silence for operational security reasons. The lack of communication made coordination impossible, but the support was desperately needed regardless. The Taliban fighters began to realize they were being engaged by a sniper from an unexpected direction, and several of them turned their attention toward the eastern cliffs. However, their return fire was ineffective because they could not identify the exact location of the concealed position. The unknown marksman had chosen his hide site with exceptional skill. Patterson took advantage of the reduced enemy pressure to move between team members and assess their condition more thoroughly. Davis was losing blood from his shoulder wound, but the injury was not immediately life-threatening if properly treated. Thompson had multiple lacerations from rock fragments, but remained combat effective. Despite his injuries, Kelly managed to get his machine gun functioning properly again and immediately engaged enemy positions that were now exposed due to the confusion caused by the unknown sniper's intervention. The machine gunner's accurate fire forced several Taliban fighters to abandon advanced positions they had spent hours reaching, significantly reducing the immediate threat to the SEAL team. The mysterious sniper continued engaging targets with methodical precision, eliminating enemy fighters who exposed themselves while trying to locate his position. Each shot was carefully aimed and devastatingly effective, demonstrating marksmanship skills that impressed even the experienced SEAL team members who were benefiting from the intervention. Thompson used the distraction created by the sniper to reposition several of his remaining explosive charges, creating a more effective defensive perimeter around the team's location. The demolitions expert worked quickly while enemy attention was focused elsewhere, knowing that this unexpected reprieve might be their only opportunity to improve their defensive position. Morrison attempted to coordinate his fire with the unknown sniper, engaging targets that would complement the other marksman's efforts. However, without communication, the coordination was limited to basic tactics and timing. Both snipers demonstrated professional competence in their target selection and engagement priorities. The Taliban commander could be heard shouting orders as he attempted to reorganize his fighters and regain the initiative in the assault. However, the appearance of an unknown sniper in an unexpected location had created confusion and uncertainty among the enemy forces, disrupting their carefully planned attack. Rodriguez counted at least 6 enemy fighters who had been eliminated by the mysterious sniper's accurate fire, significantly reducing the numerical advantage that had made the Taliban assault seem unstoppable. The spotter also noted that the enemy's rate of fire had decreased considerably as fighters sought better cover and tried to identify the new threat. Chen seized the opportunity created by the enemy's confusion to redistribute ammunition among his team members and establish better defensive positions. The team leader knew this reprieve might be temporary, but it offered their first real hope of survival since the firefight had begun hours earlier. The unknown sniper's position remained completely concealed despite intensive efforts by enemy fighters to locate and engage the mysterious marksman. Whoever was providing support had exceptional skills in camouflage and concealment, remaining invisible even when engaging multiple targets in rapid succession. Davis, despite his wound, managed to engage several enemy positions with his machine gun, taking advantage of the reduced enemy fire to expose targets that had been too dangerous to engage previously. The machine gunner's accurate fire further disrupted enemy coordination, and prevented them from regaining their previous overwhelming advantage. The Taliban fighters began withdrawing from their most advanced positions, apparently recognizing that their assault had been compromised by the unexpected intervention of the concealed sniper. However, they maintained their positions on the surrounding high ground and continued to represent a significant threat to the trapped SEAL. Team Patterson completed emergency treatment of Davis's wound and reported that all team members remained combat effective despite their injuries and exhaustion. The medic's assessment gave Chen hope that his team might survive if they could maintain their improved defensive position and continue receiving support from their unknown ally. The mysterious sniper fired again, eliminating an enemy spotter who had been directing fire from the western approach. The shot demonstrated not only exceptional marksmanship, but also tactical understanding of which targets would most effectively disrupt enemy operations. Their unknown ally clearly possessed both the skills and experience of a professional military sniper. The mysterious sniper's intervention had turned the tide of the battle, but the Taliban fighters were adapting to the new threat and beginning to coordinate their response. Enemy commanders repositioned their forces to account for the sniper's location, while maintaining pressure on the SEAL team's position. The situation remained desperate, but for the first time in hours, Team Bravo had hope of survival. Chen used the tactical advantage created by their unknown ally to establish communication with his team members and coordinate a more effective defense. The team leader realized they needed to capitalize on this opportunity before the enemy could fully adapt to the changed battlefield conditions. Every minute of reduced enemy pressure was precious and had to be used wisely. Morrison worked to repair his damaged rifle scope using field expedient methods, knowing that his marksmanship skills would be crucial if they were to survive the continuing engagement. The sniper used tape and wire from his equipment to stabilize the scope's mounting system, accepting reduced accuracy in exchange for some magnification capability. The unknown sniper continued engaging high-value targets with devastating precision, eliminating enemy leaders and weapon specialists who were attempting to reorganize the assault. Each shot demonstrated not only exceptional marksmanship, but also tactical intelligence in target selection. The mysterious marksman understood how to most effectively disrupt enemy operations. Williams managed to intercept fragmented radio transmissions suggesting that coalition forces were responding to their earlier distress calls. The communications specialist could not determine the exact nature of the response or estimated time of arrival, but the knowledge that help was potentially on the way provided crucial morale support for the exhausted team. Rodriguez spotted enemy fighters attempting to flank the mysterious snipers, positioned from multiple directions. Apparently having identified the general area of the concealed marksman, the spotter tried to warn their unknown ally by firing at the flanking forces, hoping the engagement would alert the sniper to the developing threat. Against his position, the Taliban forces demonstrated their tactical competence by simultaneously maintaining pressure on the SEAL team while organizing a coordinated effort to locate and eliminate the concealed sniper. Enemy fighters moved carefully through the rocky terrain, using cover and concealment techniques that showed professional military training. Thompson repositioned his remaining explosive charges to create kill zones that would funnel enemy attacks into areas where his teammates could engage them most effectively. The demolitions expert worked quickly and quietly, knowing that the Taliban fighters would eventually resume their assault. Despite the complication created by the unknown sniper, Kelly and Davis coordinated their machine gunfire to create interlocking fields of coverage, making it extremely difficult for enemy fighters to advance on their position without exposing themselves to accurate fire. The two machine gunners had worked together for years and could coordinate their actions with minimal communication. The mysterious sniper's rate of fire increased as enemy fighters attempted to close on his position, demonstrating that the unknown marksman was now fighting for his own survival while continuing to provide support for the trapped SEAL team. The precision of the shots remained consistent despite the increased pressure, showing exceptional composure under fire. Patterson completed treatment of all team members' injuries and redistributed medical supplies to prepare for the possibility of more serious casualties. The medic also prepared to treat potential injuries to their unknown ally if they could establish contact and provide mutual support against the common enemy. Enemy return fire intensified, as Taliban fighters attempted to suppress both the SEAL team and the mysterious sniper simultaneously. However, their divided attention reduced the effectiveness of fire directed at either position, giving both groups of defenders crucial breathing room to maintain their resistance. Chen made the decision to attempt a tactical withdrawal to a position that would allow his team to provide mutual support for their unknown ally. The SEAL team leader recognized that their survival was now linked to the mysterious sniper's continued effectiveness, and coordinated action would benefit both parties in the ongoing firefight. The sound of distant helicopters suddenly became audible over the chaos of the gunfight, causing both American and Taliban fighters to pause momentarily and listen carefully. Williams confirmed through his damaged radio equipment that coalition aircraft were approaching their location, having finally responded to the earlier distress calls. Morrison engaged enemy fighters who were attempting to reach the mysterious sniper's position, using his partially repaired scope to provide covering fire for their unknown ally. The SEAL sniper's shots were less precise than usual due to his damaged equipment, but they were effective enough to disrupt the enemy's coordinated advance. The Taliban commander recognized that the situation was deteriorating rapidly with the approach of coalition aircraft and the continued effectiveness of the concealed sniper. Enemy fighters began showing signs of preparing to withdraw from their positions, rather than face engagement with helicopter gunships and reinforcements. Rodriguez finally spotted clear movement in the mysterious sniper's position and was amazed to see what appeared to be a single individual engaging multiple enemy fighters with calm precision. The spotter realized that their unknown ally was operating alone, making his intervention even more remarkable and heroic. Thompson detonated his remaining charges in sequence, creating rockfalls that blocked several routes the enemy had been using to advance on both the SEAL team and the mysterious sniper. The demolitions experts' actions bought crucial time as coalition aircraft approached and enemy forces began their withdrawal. The mysterious sniper fired his final shots at enemy fighters who were attempting to escape with weapons and equipment, preventing valuable military hardware from being recovered by the Taliban forces. Each shot continued to demonstrate the exceptional marksmanship that had saved the SEAL team from annihilation. Kelly and Davis maintained suppressive fire as enemy fighters began their withdrawal, ensuring that the Taliban forces could not conduct an organized retreat or take time to recover their casualties and equipment. The machine gunners' accurate fire accelerated. The enemy's departure from the battlefield. Coalition helicopters arrived overhead and immediately began engaging fleeing enemy fighters with devastating effectiveness. The aircraft's advanced sensors and weapon systems made short work of Taliban forces who had dominated the battlefield through superior numbers and positioning just minutes earlier. Williams established radio contact with the incoming aircraft and provided target information and friendly force locations to prevent fraternal fire incidents. The communications specialist was relieved to finally have clear radio communications after hours of isolation and uncertainty. Patterson prepared to treat any injuries that coalition forces might find when they reached the mysterious sniper's position, knowing that the unknown marksman might be wounded after his prolonged single-handed engagement with multiple enemy fighters. The Taliban fighters completed their withdrawal from the immediate area, leaving behind equipment, casualties, and wounded personnel in their haste to escape the overwhelming firepower of the coalition aircraft. The enemy force that had seemed unstoppable hours earlier was now broken and scattered across the mountainous terrain. Chen led his team toward the location where Rodriguez had spotted the mysterious sniper, hoping to finally meet the individual who had saved their lives through exceptional courage and marksmanship skills. The SEAL team moved carefully through the rocky terrain, maintaining security while approaching their unknown ally's position. Morrison reached the sniper's hide first and was stunned to discover Master Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, a Marine Corps sniper who had been conducting her own reconnaissance mission in the area when she heard the firefight developing. The veteran marksman had been operating alone for 3 days and had exhausted most of her ammunition saving the SEAL. Team Rodriguez examined Mitchell's shooting position and was impressed by the exceptional fieldcraft that had allowed her to remain concealed while engaging dozens of enemy fighters. The Marine sniper had created a nearly invisible hide that provided excellent fields of fire while protecting her from enemy observation and return fire. Williams established communication between Mitchell and the coalition aircraft overhead. Coordinating her extraction along with the SEAL team, the communications specialist learned that the Marine sniper's original mission had been to gather intelligence on the same enemy forces that had nearly destroyed Team Bravo. Thompson examined the area around Mitchell's position and found evidence of the incredible odds she had faced while providing support. The demolitions expert counted over 40 spent cartridge cases and noted that the Marine had been engaging targets at ranges that would challenge even the most skilled marksman. Patterson treated minor injuries that Mitchell had sustained during her prolonged engagement, including cuts from rock fragments and strain injuries from maintaining shooting positions for extended periods. The medic was amazed that the Marine sniper had operated alone for so long under such dangerous conditions. The extraction helicopters landed in a secure area nearby, and both the SEAL team and Marine sniper were evacuated safely from the battlefield. During the flight back to base, Mitchell explained that she had been tracking the enemy force for several days and had positioned herself to observe their activities when the firefight began. Chen recommended Mitchell for appropriate recognition of her heroic actions, knowing that her intervention had saved 8 American lives through exceptional courage and skill. The SEAL team leader also ensured that her intelligence on enemy operations was properly reported to higher headquarters for use in future operations. The debriefing revealed that Mitchell had eliminated 17 enemy fighters during the engagement, disrupting a major Taliban operation that had been planned for weeks. Her solo intervention had not only saved Team Bravo, but it also prevented a significant enemy attack on coalition forces in the region.